All right, welcome back, fourth grade. Everybody looking at those 8 things on the board? Strategies. Be thinking, which ones do you already know? Especially those of you that have been here since kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. Several of these, and even maybe some of the actions, should seem familiar. I'm going to pause because that's going to be a real problem if that falls. I try to move away from that table. All right, which of these look familiar? What do you know about them? When would you use them? What would it sound like in your brain? Can you give me an example? 1 minute with a shoulder partner about them. All right, eyes on the board in 3 and 2 and 1. Hi, I'm Mrs. Athey. What's your name? David. Nice to meet you. Hi, Mrs. Athey. What's your name? Nice to meet you. Hi, Mrs. Athey. What's your name? Bradley. Nice to meet you. We have just been introduced. Now, I've known you guys for a few years now, but if I had just met David, well, now I know his name, I know what he looks like, I know what grade he's in. I've had a quick introduction. Today, I'm going to introduce you to all 8 of these. So we're going to get a quick peek at them, what they do, how they help us as a reader, and then as you go through 4th grade, you're going to be picking maybe 1 or 2 at a time to really focus on. Now, I asked you when you sat down to be thinking, which ones have you already been introduced to? Which ones do sound familiar? Can you give us an example? So let's list a couple and see what you already know. Okay, Japin, when you look like a learner, I'll allow you to share.
A question.
Okay, tell us about that, or give us an example.
A question is, you ask another person where this is or what that is.
Okay, words like what is, what could that maybe have to do with reading?
Well, let's say you're trying to find the dog books and you don't know, and you're not looking around to find them. You just go up to the person and ask them. If you can't find it, you just go ask you. Or if you say, well, you gotta go look first, and then you look. And then if you don't know, just ask the person, hey, do you know where the cat books are?
Okay, so Japin's been introduced. He knows what question words are. Do you know, where, what? Today I'm going to introduce you. How could you ask a question to a book? Okay, so we're going to go into that one. Who has another one they've been introduced to? Nicholas?
Summarize.
Okay, tell us about that one.
Summarize is where you've read the story many times and you try to predict what's in the story, and then you reread it to see if you got the summarize correct.
Okay, I kept hearing that word re, and I know you guys know that prefix means do it again. So he said you've reread. Something to do with summarize. Good tip. All right, let's get a couple more. Which one are you familiar with? Yeah, tell us about that one.
You think that something is going to happen before you actually read.
Okay, is this going to happen before I've read it? We'll see if we're right or not. Okay.
Connection.
Okay, about that one.
Well, in a book, like if you're reading it and something, and the book is like something that's happened in your life, that's a connection because it's like the same thing.
So something in the book is like something in your life. It's the same thing. Okay, and I saw a lot of hands go down. Some of you had already also been introduced to that one. Olivia?
Summarizing.
Okay, we've talked about that one, so I'm going to hold the rest in your head. I'm going to get these 2 hands, and then we're going to introduce the others.
I'm just going to do clarify.
Okay, you've been introduced to clarify. What does that mean?
It means that, like, when you clarify something, it means that you'll check to make sure
being right.
Check to make sure it's right. We'll hear that again in a few moments. And one more, Miss Dempsey.
Infer.
Okay, ooh, that's a toughie. What do you think?
Infer means, basically, the author doesn't tell you something. You have to make a guess of how something happened.
Okay, maybe something the author didn't tell you. So we found a little bit of introduction. And these are these bottom three are the ones that I would think fourth graders wouldn't know a lot about yet. So we are again going to introduce all 8 today. So if you weren't as familiar with some of them as other people, today you're going to get an introduction, and then your teacher will be working with you. Miss Polly might be working with you. Any reading teacher is going to be working with you on all of them this year. All right, so we're going to read this book called The Stranger by Chris von Allsburg. And I'm going to introduce you to the reading strategies, because this is what good readers do to make sure they comprehend the text. And what's the point of reading if you don't understand what you're reading, right?
Yeah.
That's part of our I Pick. That's why we read. So, introducing reading strategies to help us understand our text. You see I put in several of my sticky notes. That's going to tell us when to stop and do one of the reading strategies. Stranger. It was the time of year Farmer Bailey liked best, when summer turned to fall. He whistled as he drove along. A cool breeze blew across his face through the truck's open window. Then it happened. There was a loud thump. Mr. Bailey jammed on his brakes. Oh no, he thought, I've hit a deer. Hey, I'm going to do that top one. So we're going to model the connection. For those of you that weren't here in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, you take your bottom hand and your top hand, connect them together like a Lincoln log or a Lego. Okay, practice now because you will be doing this with your teacher. We'll wait till everybody's got their hands ready. All right, a connection. And I think it was Peyton who said, something that's happened the same to you. So I'm going to model a connection because it helps me understand the character. It's going to help me understand Mr. Bailey. Might help me understand the setting. And it's going to help me visualize and stay interested in the story. Well, I've got 2 connections. Right now, it is turning into fall. And it has been nice that we can open our windows again. When we drive, you might put down your window, or if you have a convertible, or I have a sunroof. I like to open that up and feel the fresh air, because sometimes after summer, when it's been so hot every day, even so hot, sometimes we're stuck inside, it's nice to just kind of feel that cool breeze coming in. So I'm having that connection. I'm also having a connection. About 5 years ago, I did hit a deer with my car. I was driving on the highway, and a deer quickly ran across the road, and it broke my window. It does make a very loud thump. It is very shocking. It can be very scary. It can hurt the deer a lot. It can damage your car a lot. Luckily, nobody was injured, but I know how that shock feels and that sense of scary, oh my goodness, what just happened feels. So I've got a connection. But it wasn't a deer the farmer found lying in the road. It was a man. Mr. Bailey knelt down beside the still figure, fearing the worst. Then suddenly, the man opened his eyes. He looked up with terror and jumped to his feet. He tried to run off, lost his balance, and fell down. He got up again, but this time the farmer took his arm and helped him to the truck. I saw a lot of your faces, a lot of jaws dropping there. Oh, that's way worse than a deer even. Okay, after this next situation, I'm going to model clarifying, because it's going to help me clear up a confusing word or a confusing part. Mr. Bailey drove home. He helped the stranger inside, where Mrs. Bailey made him comfortable on the parlor sofa. Katie, their daughter, peeked into the room. The man on the sofa was dressed in odd, rough leather clothing. She heard her father whisper, "He must be some kind of hermit." Okay, so when we put on our glasses, it helps you see things clearer. Those of you that need glasses, if you didn't have them on, things would be blurry or out of focus. So we're going to clarify. That word was confusing to me. It must be some kind of hermit. Well, luckily, Chris von Allsburg's going to give me a clue on the rest of the page what that word might mean. A sort of fellow who lives alone in the woods. The The stranger didn't seem to understand the questions Mr. Bailey asked him. I don't think, whispered Mr. Bailey, he knows how to talk. So I'm going to model clarifying because it helps me understand that confusing part. I didn't know what hermit was, Brett, so I reread that sentence. And I reread the clues that the author gave me. Oh, it means somebody who lives alone. Well, if you lived alone, you might not know how to talk to people. You've never heard anybody talk. Okay, I'm also going to model in questioning. Now, this was one we were pretty familiar with because it helps me wonder what's going on at the beginning, the middle, after the story. It helps me stay interested. So I'm wondering, does the man not know how to talk? Is this part of his injury? Did he, maybe bump his head and he really can't talk right now? Or is he from a different country and he maybe speaks a different language? He doesn't understand English when Mr. Bailey's asking him questions. So I've got 3 questions there. Why isn't he talking? Mr. Bailey called the doctor, who came and listened to the stranger's heart, felt his bones, looked in his eyes, and took his temperature. He decided the man had lost his memory. There was a bump on the back of his head. In a few days, the doctor said he should remember who he is and where he's from. Mrs. Bailey stopped the doctor as he left the house. He'd forgotten his thermometer. Oh, you can throw that out, he said. It's broken. The mercury is stuck at the bottom. Mr. Bailey lent the stranger some clean clothes. The fellow seemed confused about buttonholes and buttons. And in the evening, he joined the Baileys for dinner. The steam that rose from the hot food fascinated him. He watched Katie take a spoonful of soup and blow gently across it, and he did exactly the same thing. Mrs. Bailey shivered. She said, there's a draft in here tonight. Okay, this was one that a lot of us didn't have a hands up on. We're going to infer. You see Mrs. Hinkle here. She's taking the book and she's bringing it in to herself. There's that little word in there too, bringing the book into you. So, like Riley said, what did the author not write down? I'm going to model inferring because it helps me understand kind of in between the lines. The author wrote these words, but maybe there's a little bit more going on that they didn't actually write the words down for. The next morning, Katie watched the stranger from her bedroom window. He walked across the yard toward 2 rabbits. Instead of running into the woods, the rabbits took a hop in his direction. He picked one of them up and stroked its ears, and then he set it down. The rabbits hopped away and then stopped and looked back as if they expected the stranger to follow. So I'm starting to infer with what the author did write and what I'm thinking in my own brain that this man probably was a hermit. It sounds like he didn't live with people at all. He doesn't really seem to know how to talk. He doesn't know about things in a house like hot soup or buttons. And he seems more comfortable around animals than people. He doesn't even talk to the people. So the author didn't write all of that down, but that's what I'm bringing in from myself too. Infer. When Katie's father went into the fields that day, the stranger shyly tagged along. Mr. Bailey gave him a pitchfork, and with a little practice, he learned to use it well. They worked hard. Occasionally, Mr. Bailey would have to stop and rest, but the stranger never tired. He didn't even sweat.
Wow.
Some of you seeing some perplexed looks. I heard some, Getting a couple clues about this stranger as we've gone.
He's a robot.
That evening, Katie sat with the stranger, watching the setting sun. High above them, a flock of geese in perfect V formation flew south on the trip that they made every fall. The stranger could not take his eyes off the birds. He stared at them like a man who'd been hypnotized. I'm going to infer again take what the book author did write down and what I know in my own brain. The stranger's looking at those geese in their V formation flying south. Well, I know from other books and TV shows and just in knowledge that birds head south when it's getting ready to get really cold out, right? They don't like the cold here, so they're going to head south. So I'm inferring that maybe in this book it's October time, kind of like it's close to us, getting ready to turn into winter. All right, on this page, we're going to summarize and make a prediction. Summarize. We summarize because it helps me pick out the most main important parts. I think it was Nicholas was telling us you remember. So, we're going to do a lasso one time around. Mrs. Zayner's up there drawing her lasso to summarize will be our signal. Well, so far, Mr. Bailey hit the man with his car. And the man doesn't seem, we think he's a hermit. He must have lived alone. He doesn't talk. He doesn't know much about inside. And he's been staying with the Baileys, and he has been learning a lot. He's learned how to work now, obviously learned how to do his clothes now, but he's still not talking much. So I've summarized 3 important parts. 2 weeks passed, and the stranger still cannot remember who he was. But the Baileys didn't mind. They liked having the stranger around. He'd become one of the family. Day by day, he'd grown less timid. He seems so happy to be with us, Mr. Bailey said to his wife. It's hard to believe he's a hermit. Okay, so my prediction. You see Mrs. Hogan looking ahead, and you guys even use the words, you look ahead. You guess what's going to happen next. I'm going to model predicting because it's going to help me understand what I will learn in the rest of the book. Well, I'm predicting that he will stay with them. They've given him hot food. They've given him clothes. They've given him kind of a job. Those are all good things, especially if he used to live alone. So I'm predicting that he looks pretty happy. He'll stay and become truly part of their family. Another week passed. Farmer Bailey could not help noticing how peculiar the weather had been. Not long ago, it seemed that autumn was just around the corner. But now it still felt like summer, as if the seasons couldn't change. The warm days made the pumpkins grow larger than ever. The leaves on the trees were as green as they'd been 3 weeks before. Take a moment to notice those ripe pumpkins. One day, the stranger climbed the highest hill on the Bailey farm. He looked to the north and saw a puzzling sight. The trees in the distance were bright red and orange, but the trees to the south, like those around the Baileys, were nothing but shades of green. They seemed so drab and ugly to the stranger. It'd be much better if all the trees were red and orange. The stranger's feelings grew stronger the next day. He couldn't look at the tree's green leaves without sensing that something was terribly wrong. The more he thought about it, the more upset he became, until finally he could think of nothing else. He ran to a tree and pulled off a leaf. He held it in his trembling hand, and without thinking, he blew it with all his might. Being a good detective as we read, you might be starting to pick up some clues about the stranger. At dinner that evening, the stranger appeared dressed in his old leather clothes. By the tears in his eyes, the Baileys could tell that their friend had decided to leave. He hugged them all once, then dashed out the door. The Baileys hurried outside to wave goodbye, but the stranger had disappeared. The air had turned cold, and the leaves on the trees were no longer green.
Oh, it's like the movie Tammy Green. I'm starting to get to it.
There's some connections happening. All right, on this page, we're going to synthesize. There's my picture. You see, I've got my cookie dough bowl and my spoon. I'm going to stir up. I've put in my ingredients. Some chocolate chips, some flour, some sugar. That's not a cookie. until I mix it together and I put it in the oven, and then it comes out as a chocolate chip cookie. Well, when you synthesize, you're going to take the ingredients from the book and change them. How did they change you? What did you learn from the book? Every autumn since the stranger's visit, the same thing happens at the Bailey's farm. The trees that surround it stay green for a week after all the other trees have turned. Then overnight, they change their color to the brightest of any tree around. And etched in frost on the farmhouse windows are words that simply say, "See you next fall." I'm going to model synthesizing. If you've been a good detective, you could synthesize too. New ideas that I learned from the book, and how did it change me? This book helps me remember that not everything is exactly as it seems. Okay? You can't just look at a person's outsides and think you know how smart they are, or what job they do, or how much money they have. Okay? You have to get to know them. So now I'm thinking back to some clues in the book. The thermometer didn't work on the man. The doctor even thought the thermometer was broken. The stranger was fascinated by the steam. The man was really good with the animals. The man thought the green trees were odd, and he thought that was really interesting that the birds were heading south for the winter.
It's a ghost.
Okay? Kind of a ghost.
It's a god.
Have you heard of a character named Jack Frost?
Oh.
That brings the winter, they say. Okay?
Oh, because it's kind of
Kind of interesting.
So Jack Frost is kind of gone.
When they tried to go say goodbye, he was just gone.
Oh, it's
Couldn't
kind of like
speak.
Elf on the Shelf. It's the opposite of Jack
And
Frost.
their trees stay for one extra week green, and then theirs are the prettiest all around. See you next fall. So, this is helping me learn that you can't always judge a person or a book by its cover. All right, now the last one you see, Mr. Horn there, he is holding up a check mark and evaluating. Mr. Horn likes to evaluate how kids are doing. How are you learning? How are you making good choices? How are you being as a learner? Your teacher likes to, every day, is evaluating. How are you doing? Are you getting better at math? Are you getting better at reading? How is your behavior and your choices? So, at the end of a book, you can evaluate the book. You can evaluate your own ideas about the book. You can evaluate the author's ideas about the book. So, we're going to do that one way today. We're going to pretend that that bookcase where the biographies are is number 1, right down the blue carpet, and that bookcase under the flag is number 10. 1 is the best. So if that's 1 and that's 10, what number am I?
5.
I'm about the middle. I'm about a 5, okay? So this is your own opinion because you're all evaluating based off your own ideas. You will stand somewhere on the number line to evaluate. Let's start by saying, well, let's just start with how much did you like this book? So if you think this was the most awesome book, you'd read it 5 times in a row, you'd go stand by 1. If you thought it was a really good, pretty cool book, it's a good book. It was okay. That'd be a 5. Yeah. Oh, I didn't like it, or horrible. Okay, so 1 to 10, 1 is the best. Evaluate how much you liked the book. Everybody go to where you want to stand. You are frozen in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so I see some people thinking, hey, really cool book. I'd read that again. Good, pretty good book. I liked it. It was a good job, Chris von Allsburg. I didn't care for this book so much. I'm not interested in probably ever checking it out again. Okay? This time I want you to evaluate. Chris von Allsburg was the author. He wrote it, and he was the illustrator. Now, whether you liked the book, loved the book, didn't like the book, how well do you think he wrote the book? What do you think about his word choice? What do you think about his idea? What do you think about how he organized the book? Even if you didn't like the book, though, that still means maybe he did a good job writing it. You decide. Awesome job.
Awesome.
And medium job, Chris Von Allsburg. Or, ooh, I'm never going to read another Chris Von Allsburg. Ready, move. New evaluation. What do you think about him as an author and an illustrator?
Awesome.
You're frozen in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, a lot of you thought he did a really great author's job and illustrating job. He kept us interested. He organized his ideas well. He chose good words. Some of you are saying, he did a good job. Maybe I'll get one of his books again, maybe not. All right, so you evaluate as you go. Come back and have a seat where you started.
I came out. Oh, well,
Everybody's back on their pockets in 3, 2, and 1. All right, let's go through the list. We're just going to read the words and then I'll tell you how you're going to close up today. Read them with me.
Connection, clarify, question, infer, summarize, predict, synthesize, evaluate.
All right, here's how you're going to show me what you learned today. Fourth graders probably have heard of Twitter on the computers or the phones. If you do a Twitter, what you do is called a tweet. So, a tweet always starts with a hashtag, like a number sign, like a tic-tac-toe board. Okay? But when you tweet, you can only write 140 letters. So you can only write a short message, a couple of words. It's not a sentence, it's not a paragraph. So, I wrote each of the strategies on a piece of paper, and I left the last group's words, because I thought, well, you might see an idea and want to branch off. You cannot copy, you can't plagiarize. What do you know about these now? And that's also going to help me evaluate which ones we need to work more on and which ones we need to work less on. So you saw this group said, well, question, hashtag ask, wonder, and then I see a lot of questioning words. Why, what, where, how? I think fourth graders could ask even more, how do you start a question word? Okay, if I even think about that book, did he? And I could add a question mark because that's a character on the keyboard. Okay, we will do that where we tap so many chairs. That's the table you freeze at. You take one marker and you write. Give you about 30 seconds, then I get a new set of chairs. You travel and you write. Okay? All right. A number between 1 and 5 to get us started. Jason, how many?
3.
Everybody stand up and tap 3 chairs and freeze.
1.